But on the website also you have the access to the recorded videos, right? The same videos. So slides are fully visible. Okay, what I did is that I pushed my video on one side a little bit. So let's see if it changes anything. Okay guys, so we did GBS yesterday. We still have to look at the physical therapy treatment of the GBS. So which statement is not correct? We have done this question yesterday, but we have not discussed it. So let's see. So jaw jerk will be normal in the case of GBS. Why it will be normal? Jaw jerk is by which cranial nerve? Fifth cranial nerve. Will the fifth cranial nerve will get affected? It might get affected, right? So okay, so reasoning you guys are saying that the jaw jerk will be normal. Is it because the fifth cranial nerve will not get affected or any other reason? So one of the very important things you'll have to remember here is that jaw jerk can be exaggerated, right? And the reason why the jaw jerk is normal in the case of GBS, that there is nothing like a diminished jaw jerk. So in any other, let's say even if the fifth cranial nerve get affected, in any other case, the reflex arc of the jaw jerk is such that it can exaggerate but it will not go diminished. So if there is a supranuclear palsy of the fifth cranial nerve, jaw jerk will be exaggerated, like maybe in the case of MS or in the case of CVA or in the case of traumatic brain injury. If the supranuclear pathways of the corticobulbar tract of the fifth cranial nerve will get affected, jaw jerk will be exaggerated. But if the fifth cranial nerve itself will get affected, right, jaw jerk should be diminished. But there is nothing like a diminished jaw jerk. So in any of the lower motor neuron disorder of the fifth cranial nerve, the jaw jerk will always be normal. Alright, not just in the GBS, let's say even if it's a ALS, and ALS is affecting the fifth cranial nerve, right, let's say. So in that case also the jaw jerk will be normal. So jaw jerk only get exaggerated, not get diminished. Alright. Definitely here also that the extent of the condition does not go up till the fifth cranial nerve, so that is one of the cause. But another cause is that in the GBS, because it's a lower motor neuron disorder, so the jaw jerk will not get affected. It will be normal. Clear guys? And when we say that the GBS affect only the lower cranial nerves, right? So we say that it goes up to the seventh cranial nerve, right? And upper will not get affected. But maybe in some more severe cases, there are seen that, like we will see the same thing in the case of ALS also, that the nerves which are supplying the extraocular muscles of the eyes, like 3, 4 and 6, they are not affected, or they use the word rarely affected. So you will see in the literature, if you will read the GBS in detail, they will say that in some cases, 3, 4 and 6 are also getting affected, or the nerve which are supplying the extraocular muscle may also get affected. But that is very rare. That is very rare actually. So for that reason, for our purpose, we always say that they are only the lower cranial nerve which are getting affected. Here guys? So first important thing here is that in the case of GBS, the jaw jerk will be normal because it's a lower motor neuron disorder. And in all the lower motor neuron disorder of the fifth cranial nerve, the jaw jerk will be normal. Is this clear, guys? Always remember that. There are well, that's a different thing. We'll talk about that sometime. Don't worry about it. Nothing. So this is clear, guys. So we are looking for a not correct statement. We are looking for a wrong statement. So this is the right statement. Patient with the GBS will present with the lower motor neuron type of signs and symptoms with the involvement of the sensation. Is that the right statement? Yes. This is the right statement. Again, in some of the cases, even in the case of GBS, sometimes the sensation may not get affected also. That can also occur depending upon the person to person. So GBS, but it is both, right? Because it's a nerve, it is a peripheral neuropathy, so it will be both sensory and the motor. But there are variations of it. In some people, sensation may be less affected, and motor will be more affected, or in some people, sensation may not get affected at all. But that will always start with the pain in the calf muscle, or it will always start from the distal to proximal. All right, guys. Second thing, the change of the sensation can be anesthesia, it can be paresthesia, it can be proprioceptive loss, it can be complete anesthesia, it can be severe pain. So any kind of this sensation you can see in the case of GBS. All right. Patient with the GBS will present with both fasciculation and fibrillation in the muscles. Is that the right statement? Yes, because it's a lower motor neuron, and fasciculation and the fibrillation are the sign of the lower motor neuron. And where would we see this? On the EMG. So fasciculation we can see with the naked eye. Fibrillation we will see on the EMG. Here, guys. So the last statement is the wrong statement, that the MMT is contraindicated for the GBS. MMT is not contraindicated. MMT is very much needed for the GBS. In fact, this is the only test we can do on the day-to-day basis when you're treating a patient with the GBS, to see whether they are improving or not, whether the muscle strength is coming back or not. Is this clear, guys? Again, when we do the MMT, we have to make sure that we are doing the MMT for a specific muscles. We cannot do the group MMT, right? So as much as possible, we will do the MMT of the individual muscle. We will not do the MMT of the group muscle. Clear, guys? So we can see that which muscles are affecting and which muscles are not affecting, or which muscles have recovered and which muscle has not recovered. So MMT is very, very important thing for the GBS, because this is the only way we check the recovery on the day-to-day basis. Here, guys? So the principles of physical therapy or physiotherapy: maintaining the airways and the ventilatory capacity. Definitely, if the airways are getting affected, even when the people have the intercostals are getting affected, right? At that time also, the breathing may be normal. But other things, what can get affected if the intercostals are getting affected? Then breathing, the normal breathing, the tidal volume will not get affected because it is controlled by the diaphragm. But what are the other things can get affected, pulmonary wise or the respiratory wise? Coughing mechanism will get affected. Why the coughing will get affected? Because abdominals are not there, intercostals are not there, right? When the thoracic will get affected, then the intercostals will also get affected, right? Abdominals will get affected. So that will affect your coughing mechanism, which means that the secretion removal will get affected. So person might be doing the normal breathing, but the secretion removal will get affected. What else can get affected in terms of your volumes? Forceful inspiration, forceful expiration will get affected. expiratory reserve volume, because that is after the normal tidal volume, so that will get affected. FCC will get affected, yes. What else? So the basic thing is that all the other volumes and the capacities will get affected other than the tidal volume, because that's the needed by the diaphragm. So that will still be continued, but all the other things, they need the forceful inspiration or forceful expiration. After the inspiratory reserve volume will also get affected, yes. So all the things which need the intercostals and the will get affected, because intercostal muscles are getting, because by the time it is going to the arms, the thoracic is already affected, and all the intercostal muscles are supplied by the T1 to T11, or abdominals by the T5 to T11 or T12. So for that reason, and by the time it reaches the arm, the thoracic area is already affected. So maybe the normal breathing may not get affected, but all these other capacities, volumes, your coughing mechanism, secretion removal techniques, everything will get affected. Alright guys? We'll come to this also, we'll come to this again. So first thing will be the maintenance of the airways and the ventilatory capacities. Now the second is the maintain and improve joint range of motion. So whatever joint range of motions we are having, or whatever, because it will be flaccid, they will be completely flaccid. So we have to make sure that the joints are not getting affected, the muscles are not getting torn, or muscles are not getting twisted. So that we have to maintain. So we'll talk about that a little bit. Prevention of any secondary complication, right? So if because of the immobility, because of the wrong position of the muscle, if we are having any secondary complication, that should be prevented. Prevent injury to the denervated muscle and monitor the recovery. So this is very important part of the GPS as a physical therapist, because when we do the exercises, we have to take a lot of precautions. So we'll talk about that. How would we monitor recovery? How would we monitor recovery? By the MMT. By the MMT. Once the muscle strength start coming back, right, then the more strengthening and the re-education of the normal muscle function will do. Re-education of the sensory awareness, if there is a sensory loss, which can be there, so we have to re-educate the person about the sensory awareness, about inspecting the skin, that is the main thing, or making sure that they understand that how they can get the pressure sore, or how they can get the any of the skin breakdown because of the creases of the bed sheet, or because of the wrong sitting position, or because of the wrong clothing, or because of the tight clothing. So all those awareness should be given to the patient, or patient should be educated about all these things. And then at last working on the cardiovascular joint. So when we look for the maintenance in the airway or the ventilatory capacity, in acute stage, the patient, if the diaphragm is getting affected, then they breathe through the tracheostomy. So usually the tracheostomy is done for the ventilator. We have to look for the positions of the postural drainage. So that will be the same what we have learned in the cardio. So here you can combine your cardio with the neuro, that what are the different position of the postural drainage can be done. I will send you a table from the Darcy Umfred book, that tells in the case of GBS, that at the different level, what should be the frequency of the postural drainage, that where it should be done 3 times a week, or every 3 hours it should be done, then it should be done every 2 hours. So so that is given as a severity of the condition, and then about the week also, that usually the GBS start recovering after after 2 weeks usually it start recovering, GBS, because GBS the nerves start getting demyelinated. Sometimes it will affect the myelin sheath. Sometimes there are times when it can affect directly to the axons also in some cases. So we'll not go into that detail. That the macrophages, they attack only myelin sheath. Sometimes they will penetrate the myelin sheath, but they will attack the axon also. And again, what happens that it reaches a plateau. Automatically it reaches a plateau that after that it will not do any damage, or maybe all the damages are done and then after that they will not do any further damage, and then either it reach plateau and then start recovering, but definitely it do not recover of itself. It may recover few things, but to subside the complete inflammation we need the medication. If we not need take the medication, then the damages will be more, or maybe if it reaches the lungs, then the person can die. So the progression reaches a plateau and then it start recovering. So that reaching the plateau take about 10 to 12 days or 10 to 14 days, or maybe you can say 1 to 2 weeks after it start recovering. So that table has given the week wise that what can be done in first 2 weeks or 3 to 4 weeks. So I will send you that table so you guys can just go through the table. Again guys, one more thing, that whatever outcome measures we have discussed yesterday, right? You don't have to remember everything, right? The extended disability one, which we have used for the MS, you don't have to remember. If you have seen already in the book, you don't have to remember each and every point. You have to just remember that, okay, this outcome measure is used for the MS, or Fugl-Mayer is used for the stroke. For FIM, film score we can use for each and every condition for the functional assistance needed for the functional activities like the bed mobility, transfer, ambulation. So you have to only know, and you should know just few points, that how you can differentiate that scale with the other scale. Alright guys? How we can do the postural drainage when the abdominals will get affected. So we can position them depending upon which segment or which lobe of the lung is affected. We can do the chest PT, like your clapping, percussion, all those things can be done. And maybe, because definitely we cannot take the deep breathing to hold, we may not be able to practice the autogenic drainage, we may not be able to practice ACBT, right? Active contraction one. So that may be possible, but still we will position them. Only by the positioning and only by the chest PT we can at least mobilize. We can mobilize the secretion from the terminal to the terminal bronchioles to the main bronchiole, or to the central line, and then the secretion can be removed with the suction. So even though we are not having the abdominals, right, still we can position the patient, we can do the chest PT, we can use the techniques of the chest PT, and we can mobilize the secretion. Here guys, and once the patient recover, once the patient, huffing can be done, because it's the why the huffing can be done. We don't need the abdominals for that, right? So huffing is done by mainly by which muscles? The pulmonary classes are over, right? Yeah. We do need abdominals for the forced expiration, but okay, I'm waiting for the answers. Some of the intercostal huffing. We need some intercostals. And what else? Not exact. Yeah, some of the laryngeal and the pharyngeal muscle, like orolarynx and the oropharynx, some of those muscles may be there to do the huffing process. So there will be some use of the intercostal. So depending upon how much your intercostals are damaged, definitely by the time it is coming to the thoracic, abdominals will be completely absent because the abdominals are the lower thoracic. So for that reason, we cannot do the complete forceful expiration, but still some huffing techniques can be used. Some forceful inspiration we cannot take. Forceful inspiration also we cannot take. So whatever a little breathing we can take, and we can hold the breathing, right? And then when when you hold the breath, and if it goes to the terminal bronchioles, because that is what happens when you take the breathing, you hold, then it distributed more into the terminal bronchioles, it loosens the secretion there, and then when you breathe out, right, along with the position of the postural drainage and the clapping and everything, then you can mobilize the secretion to the central. If the patient can do the huffing, we can ask them to bring it more towards the center. Otherwise, then we'll have to suction it. So again, depend upon patient to patient that how much intercostals are getting affected. We can do a little huffing, or we may not be able to do anything. But definitely your other breathing techniques, like what we do, the autogenic drainage, where you do the deep inspiration, then hold it, and then expire. So those techniques we may not be able to do. Clear, guys? But still, we can still position the patient for the postural drainage. You can do the clapping, you can do the percussion, vibration. All those techniques can be done to mobilize the secretion to the central airways. Again, for the postural drainage, chest PT also, there is a frequency that initially you will have to do every 3 hours. And maybe after 1 week, or once the patient start improving, then you can start doing every 8 hours. So those is also, that frequency is also there. But then again, it depends from person to person. We'll have to position them to prevent the pressure source and improve pressure source, and then for the improvement of the secretion removal. Then suctioning for the secretion removal until cough reflex is achieved. So cough reflex will be achieved only when the intercostals are getting better, or when the thoracic nerves are getting better, or your abdominal muscles is getting better. And when I say the muscle, I mean like the recovery of the nerve. When those nerves will recover, definitely those muscles will get better. And again, they will need the training again, because if the muscles are not contracting, maybe for 7 days, 10 days, or that period of time, they all go weak. So we will have to work on the strengthening of those muscles also. Once the patient is weaned off the ventilator, then we can work on more chest expansion exercises, more breathing exercises, more coughing techniques can be practiced. I was thinking of something I forgot. Is this clear, guys? Here, any question you guys have? But remember, not all the patient will go here. Not all the patient will go here up till this level. But if they go, then we have to practice this. So guys, how will be the recovery? Like, is there a pattern for the recovery also? That we know that the condition will go from the distal to proximal, it's ascending neuropathy, but how will be the recovery pattern? Or, okay, so recovery will be proximal to distal. And if there will be any, if the patient is left with any disability, what are the chances that which part of the body or which muscles will get disabled mostly, or which may not recover at all? If they if they are not completely recovering, so what are the chances that okay, this muscle is for sure, if muscles are not recovering, or if he is getting a disability, definitely he will have disability at this joint, or this muscles, or this area of the nerve? What will be that? So where it starts, GBS, distal part, right? So let's say this is your cervical, etc. Right? So it's starting from the calf muscle, right? So let's say it reached here in 3 days. Then again it covered all the thoracic, maybe for another 4 days. And by the time it reached to the cranial nerve, let's say it's like the hand function and everything, another 4 5 days, and then another 4 5. I'm just tentatively I'm writing. So let's say this is your about 14 days, right? So if we started treatment here, right, right after 2 3 days, so everything will get recovered, right? If you have started treatment here, so again the recovery will take place. But for this joint, it has been already 7 days. Are you guys getting it, guys? If we started the treatment by the time it reached here, then for the ankle joint, it's already the 14 days. So the days are increasing, right? So more, if we had started treatment in a later days, right? So there are chances that this distal part, which was started first, it has been more days. It has been like maybe 7 days, 10 days to those muscles when they got affected, or those nerves when they got affected. So when it will recover, there are chances that the patient might not get the ankle movement, or might not get the contraction back in the muscles of the which are controlling the ankle joint or the knee joint. Alright, guys? Or same thing in the arm also. If everything is recovering, but the hand has started. So if anything will remain or anything will not recover in the pectoral girdle or in the upper extremity, it will be the hand function. So usually your hand function might not come back, or if it will come back, it will come back in the last, or same thing with your ankle movement also. So if any disability will be present, there may be patient might have the foot drop for the rest of the life, but they may not have the proper hand function for rest of the life. Alright, guys? Usually cranial nerve eighth affection is not seen in the case of GBS. Means I have not seen anywhere where they have mentioned the cranial nerve eighth affection. For the suctioning, we don't need the muscle back to the normal. But we cannot be dependent on the suctioning, right? We need the muscle back to the normal, so patient can achieve his own coughing mechanism, patient can achieve his own secretion removal. We are doing the suctioning because the muscles are not back to normal. So for suctioning, we don't need the muscle back to normal. But we need the muscle back so we can stop suctioning and the patient can be of his own. Right? So if any disability will be there, it will be in the ankle joint or the hand function. Now, guys, if we'll talk about the diagnosis of the GBS, and if we have given both EMG and the nerve conduction velocity, which one would you pick? Because we do both. We do EMG also, we do nerve conduction velocity also in the case of GBS. But if you have to pick just one, which will be most appropriate, it will be nerve conduction velocity. Because remember, this is the issue of the nerve. It's a peripheral neuropathy. Peripheral neuropathy will affect the muscle. So yes, if you do the EMG will have the sign of the lower motor neuron disorder. The muscles will have the signs of the presentation of the lower motor neuron disorder. But if you have to choose one, you will use the nerve conduction velocity. Clear, guys? Same thing in the case of DMD, muscular dystrophy. If these two are given, then we'll rely on the EMG, and definitely they do the nerve conduction velocity also to make sure that if there is not any other neurological disorder. But when the muscles are getting affected, then if you have to choose one of them, then we'll use the EMG in the case of DMD. Is it making sense, guys? Both are done in the case of GBS also, both are done in the case of DMD also, just to rule out everything. But if you have to choose one, this will be one for the nerve conduction velocity, will be one for the GBS. Now, improvement of joint range of motion and improvement of our maintenance of the joint range of motion. So, we'll give the in the acute stage, we'll give the gentle passive joint range of motion to all the joints. Alright, guys. Um, Proper positioning in order to prevent contractures. So, how we can prevent the contractures, or what do we have to keep in mind while we are positioning, or how we can position them right with the use of splint. Alright, because these muscles are completely flaccid, so there are chances that they can get twisted, or they can get in a wrong position, and patient may not be able to move it. So first thing, we'll do the splinting. With the splinting also, we can maintain the proper length tension relationship of the muscle. So whenever the muscles are getting back, or whenever the nerves are regenerating, then those muscles will be in the optimum length tension relationship, so they can achieve better contraction, or they can recover faster. Alright. While doing any passive range of motion, we have to keep in mind about the glenohumeral rhythm. So let's say, even if we're doing the shoulder range of motion for flexion, abduction, so we have to make sure that passively we are moving the scapula also along with it, in order to prevent what? Impingement. In order to prevent any impingement, or also in order to prevent any subluxation also, right? If you're taking it too high, there may be possibility that it might subluxate, but before that it's the impingement. Main thing is for the impingement, we'll do that. Active foot ankle exercises, but that will come into the later stages, or patient may not be able to do active foot ankle exercises at all. So if he is not able to do the active foot ankle exercises, how we can prevent the chances of DVT? Compressive stocking, massage to assist the venous return. Compressive stocking, there are compressive devices like the pneumatic pumps. Those pumps can be used to prevent the chances of DVT. Alright, there are compartmented pumps, so they will contract. So the pumps are like this, that you wrap it around the sleeve of the pump. You will wrap it around the ankle, around the calf muscle, from ankle to knee joint. There may be three compartments, so maybe distal compartment will contract first, then middle, then proximal. So it will assist in the venous return. So that can be done, or massage can be done to assist the venous return, because patient